Dad said. "We're cutting you off, you're a failure!" So I packed my stuff without a word. 6 months later he was at my office, and my assistant asked if he had an appointment. The last time I had dinner at my parents' house, the chicken was overcooked, the wine was bitter, and my father's disappointment was thick enough to spread on toast. "Ethan," he said, stabbing at his plate like it owed him something, "you're 28 years old. You've got a degree from Wharton, a $1,000 suit, and you're working out of a shared co-working space on a laptop that looks like it came out of a garage sale. You think that's success?" I didn't answer. I just kept cutting my food into smaller and smaller pieces, pretending I wasn't used to this by now. He always talked like that. Like everything I did was a mistake. Growing up in a house like ours, with a 6-car garage, a lawn manicured within an inch of its life, and a plaque in the foyer that read, "The last name, legacy begins here," there wasn't much room for dreams that didn't have a balance sheet attached. I was supposed to step into his shoes, eventually take over the firm. Corporate law. Big clients. Big checks. Big silence between father and son. But I had this thing in my chest, this itch. I didn't want his life. I didn't want oak desks and dinner parties with people who'd ask how the markets were doing before they asked how you were. I wanted to build something. Something real. So I said no. Again. This time, he didn't just sigh or mutter something under his breath. This time he laughed. Not a funny kind of laugh. A cold, clipped, almost triumphant one. Then he stood up, pushed his chair in, and looked down at me like I was something he needed to scrape off his shoe. "We're cutting you off," he said. "You're a failure." And then he walked out of the dining room like he hadn't just shattered the last piece of hope I had that maybe, just maybe, he'd come around. I didn't yell. Didn't cry. Didn't even flinch. I just stood up, went to my room, and packed. 2 hours later, I drove away from the only life I'd ever known. I didn't say goodbye. My apartment was a shoebox. A 5th-floor walk-up with paint peeling from the corners and a draft that never quite left, even in June. It had no dishwasher, no laundry, and barely enough room for a bed and a desk, but it was mine. For the first 2 weeks, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was working yet, I didn't even know where to start, but because silence, real silence, is loud when you're used to ceilings with chandeliers and a house staff that pretended not to hear your arguments. I lived off ramen and black coffee. Cancelled every streaming subscription. Sold my watch, yeah, that watch, just to cover my first 3 months' rent. Pride wasn't an option anymore. I'd given that up the second I walked out of my father's house without a cent to my name. But somewhere in that gray haze of exhaustion and doubt, something clicked. It started with a notebook. A beat-up old Moleskine I found at the bottom of a box. I filled it with ideas, scratched out logos, questions, names of startups I admired, things I could do differently. I didn't know exactly what the business would be yet, but I knew who it was for, people like me. People stuck in systems built by someone else, desperate for a ladder of their own. I worked out of a dingy cafe that didn't care how long I stayed. 10 hours a day, then 12. I'd scribble ideas, cold email people I barely knew, pitch clients on services I hadn't even built yet. I got ignored. A lot. Then someone replied. Her name was Meredith. She was a consultant for small businesses, and she gave me 20 minutes. I used every second. At the end of the call, she said, "I don't usually do this, but you've got something. You remind me of someone I knew in the early days. He runs a company worth $500 million now." She didn't give me money. She gave me something better, validation. That night, I didn't eat ramen. I didn't eat anything. I just sat on the floor, staring at my notes, thinking, it's happening. It's really happening. After Meredith's call, I sprinted. Not literally, though I probably could have used the cardio, but in every other sense of the word. I built my website in 48 hours using free tools and broken Wi-Fi. I offered free trials to early adopters, bartered services, sent cold DMs to strangers at 3 a.m. I was shameless. My product? A streamlined, AI-powered client engagement tool for small teams. I know, tech bros are a dime a dozen. But I wasn't in it to impress VCs or make a flashy app with a neon logo. I wanted to solve a real problem I'd seen over and over: talented people drowning in follow-up emails, lost leads, and too many damn spreadsheets. It wasn't glamorous. The first version crashed every other day. The server once went down for 17 hours because I forgot to renew a $12 domain. I was exhausted. Burnout. One night, I fell asleep on my keyboard and woke up with the letter G stamped into my forehead. But little by little, things changed. Meredith sent a client my way. Then another. Then someone featured us on a small business blog. That got us a dozen new sign-ups. One of them happened to work at a boutique firm in Austin. She loved the tool, showed it to her boss. A week later, they signed a contract. 5 figures. When I saw the email confirming payment, I laughed so hard I cried. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it meant. I wasn't just surviving, I was building. Without handouts. Without a trust fund. Without my father's name on my email signature. I took a screenshot of the payment and set it as my phone background. My company, was officially profitable. Not wildly. Not buy a boat. Profitable. But I could afford rent. I bought a real desk. I even treated myself to a proper meal that didn't come from a microwave. It was only month 4. And I hadn't even started yet. It happened in an elevator. Not some metaphorical elevator pitch on a dream stage, but an actual elevator. One of those old ones that groans between floors and makes you wonder if you should have taken the stairs. I had just finished a coffee meeting in a building downtown, one of those glossy towers filled with people wearing name badges and startup optimism. My shirt had a coffee stain on the sleeve. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks. As I stepped in, someone else followed, a guy in his early 50s, suit sharp enough to slice bread, Bluetooth in his ear, tired but polished. He looked familiar, but I didn't place him right away. "Bad day?" he asked, eyeing the stain. "Bad laundry skills?" I replied. He laughed. "Startup guy?" I nodded. "Trying. What's your thing?" I hesitated. Then I told him. Quickly, clearly. I didn't even realize I had the pitch memorized by heart until it spilled out like a reflex. We help small businesses automate client engagement without hiring a full-time team. AI-driven but human in tone. Saves time, saves sanity, keeps clients happy. He tilted his head. "You've raised?" I shook my head. "Bootstrapped. I've been eating noodles for 6 months." He smiled. "Gutsy. You got a card?" I didn't. What I had was a QR code taped to the back of my phone case that led to our landing page. I showed him. He scanned it. "Smart. I'm Dennis. My firm mentors early-stage founders. We also invest." The elevator dinged. He stepped off. "Check your inbox later." And just like that, the doors closed. I didn't think much of it. People say things. They forget. But 3 hours later, I got an email. Subject line, "Let's talk. Tomorrow." Dennis wasn't just a random exec. He was a partner at a venture firm that had backed some serious companies. The next day, I met him again, this time in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked half the city. I wore the only clean shirt I had and brought printouts of everything I could pull together overnight. He grilled me for 2 hours. About the product, the market, our numbers, my background. When I told him about my family, without using names, he nodded slowly, like he understood more than he let on. "This thing you've built," he said. "It works. And you're the right kind of angry." That threw me off. Angry? Hungry is what most founders are. But anger, that sharp, quiet kind, can build empires. If you don't let it eat you first. Then he offered me seed funding. Enough to hire 2 engineers, build out the back end properly, and stop living off granola bars. We signed papers a week later. My company got a name. A logo. An office with walls that weren't just white paint over drywall. I called it Graft, because nothing about it came easy, and every inch of progress was earned. By month 5, we were onboarding 3 new clients a week. Then 5. Then 7. We were featured in a tech newsletter. A business podcast interviewed me. The local news ran a piece about the startup that rose from rejection. They called me a self-made innovator. That part made me laugh out loud. Because I hadn't made myself. I'd been forged, by fire, by silence, by that final dinner where my father called me a failure and walked out without looking back. And now? Now I had an office with my name on the glass. Employees who believed in the mission. Clients who sent thank you emails. And one morning, 6 months to the day after I packed my bags and walked out of my father's world, my receptionist buzzed in. It was a Thursday. Nothing special. I'd just finished my 3rd cup of coffee and was knee-deep in reviewing a new feature rollout. My team was buzzing outside my office. Sam was troubleshooting a client bug, Maria was prepping a pitch deck, and I could hear laughter from the break room. Things felt alive. Then the intercom blinked. "Hey Ethan," came Anna's voice, my assistant, efficient and unshakable. "There's a Mr. Caldwell here. Says he's your father. Does he have an appointment?" The air shifted. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. I stared at the speaker, heart thudding with a sudden heaviness I couldn't explain. "Did he say what he wants?" I asked. "No. Just that he's here to see you. He's standing. He didn't sit down. Looks kind of, well, uncomfortable." I closed my laptop. Looked around my office. The polished desk, the awards on the shelf, the framed article with my face on it from Tech Spotlight. My name etched on the frosted glass door behind me. I thought back to that night 6 months ago. Him standing in the dining room, arms crossed, saying I was a failure. That they were cutting me off. Like I was a wire that no longer served its purpose. I exhaled. "Send him in," I said, my voice calm, steady. The door opened, and there he was. Same navy blazer, same pressed slacks. But something had changed. His posture was tighter. The arrogance he wore like cologne had thinned. And for the first time I could remember, he looked uncertain. "Ethan," he said. "Have a seat," I replied, nodding toward the chair across from me. I didn't stand. Didn't offer my hand. He sat slowly, his eyes scanning the room. I watched him take it all in. The walls, the furniture, the details. He seemed smaller somehow, as if the room wasn't built for him anymore. "This is impressive," he said. "I've read about graft. You're doing well." I didn't answer right away. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Then I asked, "Why are you here?" He shifted. "I wanted to see you. To talk." "About?" Another pause. "About everything. About the way things ended." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the night you told me I was a failure?" His jaw tensed, just slightly. I was angry. "You were walking away from a life I'd built for you." "No," I said evenly. "I was walking away from a life you wanted to control. You built it for you. Not for me." He looked down at his hands laced together on his lap. There was no fight in him, not anymore. Just something fragile and almost unfamiliar, regret. "Your mother said you might not see me," he said. "That you'd changed." I leaned back in my chair, fingers drumming lightly on the desk. "I haven't changed. I just stopped asking for permission." Outside, I could hear the hum of my team working, voices rising and falling in collaboration. Inside, the office was quiet, heavy with a kind of history that couldn't be rewritten, but could be rewritten around. He looked at me. "I'm proud of you, Ethan." I didn't smile. Didn't soften. Because this time, I set the terms. He said he was proud of me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need to hear it. That realization hit harder than I expected. Not in a triumphant way. Not in an "I told you so" kind of way. It was quieter, deeper, like a door creaked shut behind me, one I'd been waiting years to walk through. And now, standing in my office, with my company's logo glowing on the wall behind me, my father's approval meant nothing more than the echo of a voice I'd already grown out of. He shifted in his seat. Your mother and I talk about you. We follow the press. I didn't know you'd made it this far. You didn't ask. I said. There it was, an old wound spoken out loud. And he didn't deny it. I was wrong, he said finally, eyes meeting mine. You needed to do this your way. I didn't see that. I only saw what I wanted you to be. I waited. Let him sit with the truth. You came here to say that? I asked. He hesitated. Not just that. I nodded slowly. There it is. He leaned forward, hands clasped like a man rehearsing humility. I need your help, Ethan. The firm, it's not what it used to be. Clients are pulling out, there's talk of restructuring. I have people depending on me, families, employees. It's slipping. I stayed quiet. I've seen what you've built, he said. You understand tech in a way our partners never have. I was hoping we could talk about a partnership. A joint project. Something that could help us stabilize. Maybe even grow. There it was. Not a visit. Not a moment of reckoning. It was business. I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. Cars weaving through traffic, people moving with purpose. I remembered being one of them, not long ago, trying to hold myself together with nothing but a cracked laptop and a thread of belief. I turned back to him. I won't join your firm, I said. Not now, not ever. His face fell. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. However, I'll consult. On my terms. At my rate. He looked up. I kept going. I'll bring in my team. We'll review your infrastructure, your systems, your strategy. But you don't get my name. You don't get my vision. You get my expertise, for a price. He stared at me, stunned. You'd do that? He asked. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it for the people you said depended on you. The people who weren't at that dinner table when you decided to cut me loose. He stood slowly. I don't deserve this. No, I agreed. You don't. But I did. I deserve to be here. In this chair. In this office. On this side of the table. He nodded, eyes heavy, and turned to leave. As he opened the door, he paused. Thank you, Ethan. I didn't answer. He left. And I finally exhaled. After that meeting, something inside me shifted, not out of bitterness, but clarity. For the first time, I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't building to prove a point. I wasn't waking up with a pit in my stomach wondering if I'd ever be good enough. I had already crossed the finish line. Quietly. Powerfully. Without applause. I got back to work. Graf took on the consulting project with my father's firm, and yes, it felt strange. Watching my team walk through glass hallways I used to run down as a kid. Watching my engineers lead presentations while the same executives who once dismissed my name now leaned in and took notes. They asked questions. They listened. I kept it professional. Sharp. Unapologetic. And it worked. We helped them streamline internal systems, modernize their client outreach, and reduce overhead by 20% in the first quarter. Their board noticed. Their investors stopped panicking. My father called it a miracle. I called it math. Meanwhile, Graft was growing. We expanded into new markets. Hired 2 more developers. Maria, my early hire, got promoted to head of product. Sam started leading client success. I stopped checking our bank account every hour. One morning, a venture article listed Graft as one of 10 startups to watch this year. I didn't forward it to anyone. I didn't need to. But what got to me most wasn't the success. It was the freedom. Freedom to say yes to what mattered. Freedom to take a day off without guilt. Freedom to help another young founder who reminded me of, well, me. That fall, I got a letter in the mail, Rio paper, embossed, my name handwritten across the front. It was from Meredith. The woman who'd taken my call when no one else would. Inside, a simple note. Still reminds me of someone I knew once. Keep going. I pinned it to my corkboard. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. It came on a Tuesday. Crisp envelope. Gold seal. My name printed cleanly across the front in heavy, serif font. An invitation. The Caldwell Foundation Annual Gala. I hadn't been invited since I left. Every year, my father's firm threw this black tie monument to itself, part charity, part networking fest, part silent brag. Back when I still lived under his roof, I'd been paraded through the ballroom like a future heir. Every handshake was a lesson. Every compliment was measured. Every glance carried a weight I didn't yet understand. And now? I was listed on the invite as Ethan Caldwell, founder and CEO, Graft. I stared at it for a while. Not because I was nervous. Just surprised. Not that they invited me, but that it actually mattered to them now. I tossed it on the table. Maria saw it that afternoon. You going? I shrugged. I don't know. Feels like a trap. She smiled. Might be fun to show up in your own name. That stuck with me. I'd spent so long disassociating from the Caldwell name, from the family tree etched in oak and gold, that I forgot something important. I hadn't changed my name. I just changed its meaning. So I went. Not out of spite. Not to prove anything. But because sometimes, walking into the lion's den is how you remind yourself you're no longer prey. I wore a simple black suit. No flashy tie. No watch. Just confidence and quiet eyes. When I entered the ballroom, heads turned. Not because I was famous. But because I looked settled. Rooted. Like someone who didn't need the spotlight to know he belonged. I caught glimpses, old partners, family friends, people I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Some raised glasses toward me. Others whispered. One woman, an old family acquaintance, walked up and said, Ethan, you've become someone. I smiled politely. I always was. The rest of the night passed in a blur of polite conversation and well-lit corners. My father gave a speech near the end, thanking the people who helped the firm survive a challenging season. He never mentioned me by name. He didn't have to. When he stepped off the stage, he looked toward me from across the room. Just for a moment. No nod. No wave. But I saw it, the flicker of understanding. I wasn't his successor. I was something else entirely. And I wasn't going anywhere. The phone call came just after New Year's. I was alone in the office. Everyone else was still on holiday, but I liked the quiet. The city felt slower that week, like it was exhaling before diving into another year. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out. But something in me said to answer. Ethan Caldwell, I said. There was a pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. Ethan, it's your uncle, Mark. Mark was my father's older brother. A man of few words, firm handshakes, and old-school values. He was never cruel like my father, but never exactly kind either. Always observing from the sidelines. I wanted to talk to you about your dad, he said. I sat down slowly. He's sick, Ethan. Pancreatic. They caught it late. I didn't say anything. He hasn't told many people. But I figured you should know. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with every moment I'd carried with me, the cold dismissals, the sharp words, the years of not enough. Does he know you're calling me? No. He wouldn't ask. Of course he wouldn't. I thought you deserved the chance to decide for yourself. Mark added. Whether you see him or not, that's your call. I thanked him. Hung up. Then I sat there for a long time. It would have been easy to harden. To say he made his bed. To walk away like he once did to me. But I also knew that this wasn't about weakness or forgiveness. It was about freedom. I had become the man I needed to be. Stronger. Clearer. And most of all, unafraid. The next morning, I asked Anna to clear an hour from my schedule. No name. No explanation. Just one word in the calendar. Closure. He looked thinner. Older somehow. Not in years, but in weight, like something had been stripped from him. Pride, maybe? I sat across from him in the hospital room. No suits, no offices. Just 2 chairs, a window, and time that no longer waited for either of us. He tried to speak first, but I stopped him with a look. "I'm not here to fix anything," I said. "I just wanted you to see what it looks like when I win on my terms." He nodded slowly. Then, with a voice that cracked under its own history, he whispered, "You did." I stood. That was enough. As I walked out, I realized something simple and powerful. His approval didn't heal me. Because I had already healed. Without it,